Commander Alara stood at the helm of the starship Odyssey, her silhouette framed by the vastness of space that sprawled beyond the observation window. Stars twinkled like distant promises, and the colors of nebulas swirled in ethereal patterns, casting a soft glow across the bridge. The ship hummed with life, its advanced systems pulsating with energy, but it was the crew that gave the Odyssey its beating heart. Today, the atmosphere was electric with anticipation and anxiety. The weight of their impending mission hung heavily over them. Ilara, with her striking features and fierce determination, commanded attention effortlessly. Her long, dark hair flowed like a cascade of night around her shoulders, contrasting sharply with the crisp, white uniform she wore. This uniform, emblazoned with the insignia of the United Earth Forces, represented not just her rank, but the hopes and dreams of humanity. She was a beacon of strength and resilience, and her crew looked to her for guidance as they prepared to confront the looming threat of the Vorkons, a hostile alien race known for their brutal tactics and cunning strategies. As she faced her crew, she could see the resolve etched on their faces, but also the flicker of doubt that lingered in their eyes. They had fought countless battles, but the Vorkons were different. Their reputation preceded them, and the fear of the unknown gnawed at the edges of Alara's mind. She took a deep breath, allowing the silence to stretch until it felt charged with unspoken words. The moment was ripe for her to ignite the fire of determination that burned within each of her crew members. With a commanding presence, Ilara began to speak, her voice steady and unwavering. She spoke of unity, of the bond that tied them together as a crew and as a species. She recounted tales of past victories, of moments when they had defied the odds and emerged stronger. Each word she uttered was a thread, weaving a tapestry of courage and hope that wrapped around her crew, reinforcing their commitment to the mission ahead. The bridge became a cocoon of energy as she painted vivid pictures of valor and sacrifice, igniting a spark of defiance against the shadow of the Vorkons. As her words flowed, she could see the transformation in the faces of her crew. The tension that had held them captive began to dissipate, replaced by a sense of purpose that radiated from her. They nodded in agreement, their postures straightening as they absorbed her fervor. Ilara felt a surge of pride swell within her. These were not just soldiers, they were her family, bound by the trials they had endured and the dreams they shared for a future free from fear. Yet, even as she inspired her crew, a nagging doubt persisted at the back of her mind. The Vorkons were no ordinary adversaries. Their tactics were ruthless, their strategies laced with deception. Ilara had heard whispers of their latest maneuvers, rumors that hinted at a more sinister plan at play. The thought of facing such an enemy filled her with an unsettling sense of foreboding, but she pushed it aside, focusing instead on the strength of her crew and their shared mission. As the crew began their preparations for battle, Ilara felt the familiar rush of adrenaline coursing through her veins. This was what she was born to do: lead, protect, and fight for the survival of humanity. She moved through the bridge, offering words of encouragement and reassurance to her team. Each interaction deepened her connection with them, reinforcing the trust they placed in her leadership. But just as the atmosphere began to shift towards confidence, a sudden alert blared through the ship, cutting through the camaraderie like a knife. The screens flickered to life, displaying a transmission that had come through the ship's communication system. Ilara's heart raced as she glanced at the readout, the words flashing ominously across the screen. It was a warning. Someone among them was a traitor. The revelation hit her like a tidal wave, crashing over the warmth of camaraderie that had just begun to flourish. A traitor. The very idea sent icy tendrils of doubt snaking through her mind. Who could it be? The thought of betrayal within her own ranks was almost unbearable. She had fought to build a team that trusted one another, that would lay down their lives for each other, and now that foundation felt like it was crumbling beneath her. As the realities of the warning settled in, Ilara's thoughts spiraled. She felt the weight of responsibility pressing down on her shoulders, a burden that seemed heavier than before. The loyalty of her crew was paramount, yet the specter of betrayal loomed large. In this moment of uncertainty, she forced herself to focus, to center her thoughts. She needed to act, to find the truth before paranoia took root among her team. As she moved away from the bridge, Ilara felt the tension in the air shift. Eyes that had once glinted with determination now flickered with suspicion. Whispers began to echo in the background, a dangerous undercurrent that threatened to unravel the unity she had worked so hard to foster. The crew had always been a family, but now, doubt crept in like a thief in the night, stealing their trust and replacing it with fear. Ilara made her way to the private quarters of Lieutenant Jax, her trusted second-in-command. He had stood by her side through countless battles, his unwavering loyalty a source of strength for her. As she entered, she found him observing the stars outside, lost in thought. The moment he turned to her, she could see the concern etched on his face. He, too, felt the weight of the warning. In the quiet of Jax's quarters, Ilara allowed herself a brief moment of vulnerability. She confided her fears about the impending war, the doubts that clawed at her insides. Jax listened intently, his gaze unwavering, offering a silent strength that bolstered her resolve. Ilara knew that the stakes were higher than ever before, and the thought of losing her crew to betrayal was a wound she couldn't bear to imagine. As the two of them strategized, Ilara's mind raced with the implications of the warning. A traitor in their midst could spell disaster, not just for their mission, but for the very essence of who they were. The crew's loyalty would be tested in ways they had never anticipated. Ilara resolved to uncover the truth, to root out the traitor before the shadows of doubt consumed them all. In that moment, as the stars twinkled in the distance, Ilara felt a renewed sense of purpose. She would fight for her crew, for humanity, and for the ideals they held dear. Whatever lay ahead, she would face it head-on, with the knowledge that the bonds of loyalty could be forged even in the darkest of times. With Jax by her side, she would rally her crew once more, igniting the flames of camaraderie and resolve in the face of impending chaos. The battle was just beginning, and Ilara was determined to lead her team through the storm, no matter the cost. The Odyssey drifted through the void of space, its sleek hull reflecting the distant starlight like a beacon of hope amidst the encroaching darkness. Commander Ilara stood firm at the bridge, her sharp gaze fixated on the viewscreen, where the chaotic dance of battle unfolded. Vorkan ships swarmed like hornets, their jagged silhouettes contrasting against the luminous backdrop of the nebula. Alarms blared and the scent of heated metal filled the air, a stark reminder of the stakes they faced. Ilara's heart raced as she surveyed her crew, each member a crucial cog in the well-oiled machine that was the Odyssey. The cacophony of commands and the rhythmic thrum of the ship's engines created a symphony of urgency. She felt a surge of adrenaline, her mind racing to formulate a plan. The Vorkans were aggressive and cunning, but Ilara had a reputation for tactical brilliance. They would not go down without a fight, and neither would she. "Shields at 70%!" a crew member shouted, her voice barely cutting through the din. Ilara nodded, her focus unwavering. She knew they had to strike fast and hard while maintaining their defenses. With a flick of her wrist, she accessed the tactical display, analyzing the movements of the Vorkan fleet. Their formations were aggressive, but there were gaps, opportunities waiting to be seized. "Divert power from the aft shields to forward," she commanded, her voice steady and authoritative. "Prepare to engage at full throttle. Target the lead ship. If we take it out, the others will scatter." The crew responded with the efficiency of years of training, each member understanding the role they played in this high-stakes game. As the Odyssey surged forward, Ilara felt the familiar rush of anticipation. It was the thrill of battle, a dance with destiny that had defined her life. The ship shook violently as enemy fire struck their shields, the vibrations rippling through the command deck like the tremors of an earthquake. She gripped the edge of the console, her knuckles whitening, but she refused to show any sign of fear. Instead, she felt the fire of determination ignite within her. "Engaging weapons systems," another crew member announced, and Alara nodded, her gaze narrowing as the reticles locked onto the lead Vorkan ship. She felt the weight of her crew's trust on her shoulders, the unspoken bond that united them in this moment. They were not just fighting for survival, they were fighting for each other, for the ideals that bound humanity together. The Odyssey unleashed a volley of plasma fire, the bright arcs of energy slicing through the void. Ilara watched as the lead ship shuddered under the assault, its shields flickering like a candle in the wind. The crew erupted into cheers, a surge of hope momentarily lifting the heavy atmosphere. But Ilara knew better than to celebrate too soon. The battle was far from over. The remaining Vorkan ships began to regroup, their formations tightening as they sought revenge for their fallen comrade. "Reinforce our starboard flank," she commanded, her voice piercing the exhilaration that threatened to cloud judgment. "We need to maintain our advantage." The crew sprang into action, their movements synchronized by countless hours of training. As the enemy fired back with renewed vigor, Ilara felt the heat of the moment envelop her, the thrill of command coursing through her veins. The battle raged on, a brutal dance of strategy and instinct. Ilara maneuvered through the chaos, her mind a whirlwind of calculations and possibilities. She could feel the tide shifting, the balance of power teetering precariously. Just as she was about to issue a new command, a flash of light caught her eye. A hidden message flickered on her console, a stark contrast to the chaos outside. It was a transmission from the Vorkons, encoded and incomprehensible at first glance. The urgency of the battle momentarily faded as she focused on the screen, her heart pounding in anticipation. As the message decrypted, it revealed a chilling truth, a conspiracy that intertwined both races, hinting at a sinister reality that Ilara had never considered. Images flooded her mind. The Vorkans, once viewed solely as adversaries, now appeared as players in a larger game. Their motivations were no longer clear-cut. They were shrouded in layers of manipulation and deceit. The implications were staggering, and Ilara's pulse quickened as realization dawned. This was more than just a conflict over territory or resources. It was a battle of ideologies, a struggle for the very essence of existence. As the battle raged on, Ilara's thoughts spiraled deeper into the implications of the message. The weight of the discovery pressed heavily on her shoulders, casting shadows over her leadership. Who could she trust? The specter of betrayal loomed ominously, and the nagging suspicion about the traitor within their ranks gnawed at her resolve. The crew, once a united front, was now a tapestry of uncertainty, each thread fraying under the strain of mistrust. The final moments of the skirmish arrived with a deafening crescendo. Ilara's tactical genius shone through as she orchestrated a decisive maneuver. With a calculated strike, they disabled the remaining Vorkan ships, sending them spiraling into retreat. Cheers erupted from the crew, but Ilara's heart remained heavy. Amidst the victory, the specter of uncertainty lingered, casting shadows over their triumph. As the Odyssey drifted into the stillness that followed the storm, Ilara called for a crew meeting. The atmosphere buzzed with adrenaline and relief. But beneath it lay a current of tension. The crew gathered, their expressions a mix of elation and apprehension. Ilara felt the weight of their expectations, the burden of their trust pressing down on her. Standing before them, she took a deep breath, steeling herself for the words she needed to say. The hidden message burned in her mind, a revelation that could alter the course of their mission. She knew she had to address the growing unease, the whispers of doubt that threatened to splinter their unity. With every eye on her, she felt the isolation of leadership, an invisible barrier that separated her from the very people she fought to protect. The murmurs of speculation began as she spoke, revealing the message and its implications. Accusations flew like missiles, piercing the fragile atmosphere they had just fought to protect. faces that had once been allies now contorted with suspicion. Ilara watched as the bond that had united them began to fray, the threads of trust unraveling before her eyes. Each word she spoke, meant to clarify and unite, seemed to deepen the rift instead. As the meeting devolved into chaos, Ilara felt the isolation envelop her, a chasm widening between her and her crew. They questioned her judgment, their loyalty wavered, and the shadows of doubt loomed larger. She stood alone at the center of the storm, a captain adrift in a sea of betrayal. The victory they had fought so hard for felt hollow, overshadowed by the specter of division that threatened to consume them all. In that moment, Ilara realized that the true battle was no longer against the Vorkons. It was within her own ranks. The echoes of distrust reverberated through the Odyssey, a haunting reminder of the fragility of human connection in the face of adversity. As she looked into the eyes of her crew, she understood that the path ahead would be fraught with challenges, not just against external foes, but against the very essence of what it meant to be united in purpose. The environment inside the Odyssey was thick with tension, a palpable weight that pressed down on Commander Ilara and Lieutenant Jax as they navigated the labyrinthine corridors of the starship. Shadows danced along the metallic walls, flickering under the harsh fluorescent lights, reflecting the uncertainty that loomed over them. They made their way to the engineering bay, where the heart of the ship pulsed with a steady rhythm, a stark contrast to the turmoil brewing in their minds. Ilara's striking features were marred by a furrowed brow, her usually confident demeanor shaken by the recent discoveries. The sabotage they had uncovered hinted at a betrayal that cut much deeper than mere mechanical failure. It suggested a rot within the very foundation of their crew's loyalty. As they entered the engineering bay, the air was filled with the acrid smell of burnt circuits and oil, remnants of the battle that had rattled them just hours before. The hum of machinery was a constant reminder of the precarious balance they maintained between survival and destruction. Jax, steadfast as ever, moved closer to the control console. His fingers danced over the holographic interface, scanning through the ship's systems with a mixture of urgency and dread. Ilara watched him work, her heart heavy with the burden of leadership. Each clack of his fingers echoed in her mind, a grim reminder of the ticking clock counting down to an inevitable confrontation with the Vorkans. They needed answers, and quickly. They needed to understand who among them was capable of such treachery and why. As the data streamed across the screen, Jax's expression shifted from concentration to shock. He glanced up at Ilara, his eyes wide with disbelief. The sabotage had not merely compromised their weapons systems, it had also tampered with life support controls. In the blink of an eye, the realization struck them both. This was not an isolated act of sabotage, but a coordinated effort designed to dismantle the Odyssey from within. Ilara stepped closer, her gaze fixed on the screen. The implications were staggering. If the life support systems were compromised, their survival during a Vorkan attack was not just at risk, it was a death sentence. Her mind raced with possibilities, each more dire than the last. Who could betray their own in such a fundamental way? The thought gnawed at her, a relentless itch that refused to be scratched. Suddenly, the ship lurched violently, throwing them off balance. Alarms blared, drowning out the hum of machinery as red lights began to flash ominously. Ilara and Jax exchanged a quick glance, their previous worries momentarily overshadowed by the immediate threat. The Vorkans had found them, and they were coming in hot. Without hesitation, Ilara sprang into action, her instincts kicking in as she barked orders through the intercom. Crew members scrambled to their stations, the chaotic energy of the impending battle filling the air. With the engineering bay secured, Ilara's mind raced. They had to regroup and reaffirm their strategy. Trust was the foundation of their efforts. And now, with the specter of betrayal looming larger than ever, she feared that the fabric of unity was beginning to unravel. Jax returned to the console, his fingers flying across the interface as he tried to stabilize the ship's systems amid the attack. Ilara could see the strain in his jaw, the way his muscles tensed as he fought to maintain control. They were outnumbered, and the Vorkan ships were relentless. The Odyssey shuddered under the onslaught of enemy fire, the hull vibrating as if it were alive with fear. Ilara gritted her teeth, a familiar fire igniting in her belly. She had led her crew through countless battles, each one precarious, yet they had always emerged stronger. But this felt different. This battle was not just against an external enemy. It was against a traitor lurking among them. As the crew fought valiantly, Ilara's mind was a whirlwind of thoughts. She needed to rally her soldiers, to remind them of their purpose, of their bond. They were not just a crew. They were a family, forged in the crucible of battle and hardship. But how could she inspire loyalty when doubt plagued their hearts? The shadows of mistrust were creeping into the very core of their unity, threatening to tear them apart just when they needed each other the most. Then came the moment that would haunt her forever. As the Odyssey spun and swerved to evade incoming fire, a familiar figure emerged from the chaos, a crew member Ilara had considered a friend. Their face was smeared with sweat and blood, eyes wide with desperation. They were supposed to be at their station, manning the weapon systems, yet here they were, abandoning their post. Ilara's heart sank as she registered the look on their face, a mixture of fear and something else, something darker. Without warning, the crew member lunged towards a control panel, fingers flying over buttons with a frantic energy that set alarm bells ringing in Ilara's mind. It was an act of sabotage, but it was too late for her to intervene. The ship shuddered violently as catastrophic failure cascaded through the systems. Lights flickered, and the atmosphere crackled with energy as emergency protocols kicked in. But it was no use. The ship was spiraling into chaos. The crew's desperate shouts drowned out by the cacophony of alarms and explosions. Jax's desperate voice cut through the noise, but Ilara could only watch in horror as the crew member's betrayal unleashed a wave of destruction. The ship lurched again, and she felt the weight of her choices crashing down around her. She had put her faith in the wrong person. Her mind raced with questions. How could she have missed the signs? Had they been plotting this from the start, or was there an even darker force at play? As the Odyssey spiraled uncontrollably, Ilara fought to regain her composure. She needed to act, needed to salvage what remained of her crew and her ship. But as she turned to Jax, she could see the realization dawning in his eyes. This was not merely a battle for survival. It was a fight against the very essence of their unity. The treachery they faced was not just external. It was an insidious poison that had infiltrated their ranks. With a steely determination, Ilara rallied what remained of her strength. She would not let this betrayal define them. They were more than the sum of their fears. They were warriors, bonded by their shared struggles. It was time to reclaim their ship, to confront the darkness that had seeped into their hearts. With Jax by her side, they moved to the bridge, ready to confront the chaos head-on. But as they fought to stabilize the ship, the weight of betrayal hung heavily in the air. The lines between friend and foe blurred, and in that moment, Ilara realized that the true battle was not just for their lives, but for the very soul of their mission. As the alarms blared and the ship rocked under the relentless assault, she steeled herself for the fight ahead, knowing that every decision would lead them deeper into the shadows of betrayal. Commander Ilara stood alone in the dimly lit command room of the Odyssey, the hum of the ship's engines reverberating like a heartbeat beneath her feet. The betrayal weighed heavily on her shoulders, a darkness that seeped into the very fabric of her thoughts. Her mind raced, replaying the moments leading up to the devastating loss. The face of her once loyal crew member haunted her, a reminder of the trust she had placed in others that had now been shattered. Ilara clenched her fists, her resolve hardening with each pulse of uncertainty. She could not afford to be crippled by this treachery. Taking a deep breath, she turned her gaze to the star field outside the viewport. The brilliant points of light flickered like distant beacons, a stark contrast to the turmoil within her. The Vorkans had shown their teeth, and there was no room for hesitation. She needed a plan, one that would not only allow her to reclaim her crew's trust, but also dismantle the web of deception that surrounded them. Ilara began pacing, her mind a flurry of strategies and possibilities. Infiltrating Vorkan territory was a gamble, but it was a risk she was willing to take. The secrets hidden within their ranks could hold the key to understanding the real motives behind their aggression. Perhaps they were not the monsters she had been led to believe, but rather victims of their circumstances, much like humanity. She envisioned a scenario where she could enter their domain, gather intelligence, and return not just as a commander, but as a bridge between their worlds. With her thoughts crystallizing into a coherent plan, Ilara summoned her most trusted officers to strategize. They gathered around the holographic table, the blue light illuminating their anxious faces. Despite the recent betrayal, she sensed a flicker of hope among them. She laid out her ideas, each proposal met with nods of understanding and a rekindling of the determination that had once defined their mission. As the details of the infiltration unfolded, Ilara could see the spark of trust beginning to ignite once more. They were a team, a family forged in the fires of adversity, and she was resolute in her decision to lead them back into the fray. The preparations began in earnest. The crew worked tirelessly, recalibrating systems, disguising the ship, and ensuring their technology was aligned with the Vorkan environment. Ilara found herself immersed in the rhythm of their efforts, the adrenaline coursing through her veins as they transformed the Odyssey into a vessel of stealth. Each task completed was a step closer to reclaiming her crew's faith and uncovering the truth about their adversaries. As they neared the point of departure, Ilara felt a flutter of anxiety mixed with excitement. This was not just a mission for survival. It was a chance to redefine the narrative that had been woven around the conflict. The potential for a new alliance loomed on the horizon, and with it, the possibility of peace. She had to believe that understanding could bridge the chasm that had formed between their species. The Odyssey slipped into the black void of space, the familiar hum of the ship a comforting presence as they entered Vorkan territory. Ilara felt the weight of every eye upon her, her crew's hopes and fears resting on her shoulders. They maneuvered through the vast emptiness, and as they approached the Vorkan homeworld, the tension was palpable. The planet emerged from the darkness, a swirling mass of blue and green pulsing with life. It was beautiful and utterly alien, a testament to the mysteries that lay within. Upon landing, Ilara donned the guise of a Vorkan envoy, her features cloaked in the intricate patterns of their culture. The ship's interior buzzed with the hushed whispers of her crew, now concealed in their own disguises. They formed a circle around her, a protective barrier as they prepared to venture out into the unknown. Ilara felt their loyalty like an unbreakable tether, anchoring her in a sea of uncertainty. As they stepped onto the surface, the air was thick with the scent of unfamiliar flora. The vibrant colors of the landscape a stark contrast to the sterile environment of their ship. The Vorkan architecture towered above them, a blend of organic and mechanical structures that pulsed with energy. Ilara's heart raced as she led her team through the bustling marketplace, where Vorkans moved with purpose, their alien features a mosaic of grace and strength. It was in this moment of exploration that Ilara encountered an unexpected ally, a Vorkan named Kale. He stood apart from the crowd, his presence commanding yet inviting. His eyes, a deep shade of emerald, held a glimmer of understanding as they locked onto hers. Kyle approached with a cautious curiosity, and Ilara sensed that he bore no ill will. Instead, there was a shared recognition of the burdens they both carried. As they conversed, an exchange of gestures and expressions, for words were insufficient, Kale revealed truths that rattled the very foundation of Ilara's beliefs. He spoke of the Vorkan's history, a lineage intertwined with humanity's own past, filled with shared struggles and mutual aspirations. The stories he shared painted a picture of a civilization not unlike her own, one that had faced adversity and loss, forging a path toward survival. Ilara felt a surge of empathy, a connection that transcended their differences. Kale's revelations were a glimmer of hope in her mind, each word a thread weaving a tapestry of potential unity. The Vorkans were not merely adversaries. They were a people with their own dreams, fears, and aspirations. The ongoing conflict was not just a clash of species, but a misunderstanding that had spiraled out of control. If only her crew could see this. If only she could convince them that a path toward peace was attainable. Yet the challenge lay ahead. Ilara knew she had to return to her crew and share what she had learned, but she feared the skepticism that might greet her. The wounds of betrayal were still fresh, and trust was a fragile thing. She mustered her courage, recognizing that her leadership was not merely about issuing commands, it was about fostering understanding, inspiring hope, and guiding her crew through the darkness that loomed over them. As the sun dipped below the horizon of the Vorkan homeworld, casting a warm glow over the alien landscape, Ilara prepared to return to the Odyssey. The weight of her discoveries pressed upon her, but so did the exhilarating possibility of what might come next. She had glimpsed the potential for a new beginning, one that could redefine the futures of both humanity and the Vorkans. With Kyle by her side, they made their way back to the ship, her heart racing with anticipation. Ilara was ready to face her crew, ready to share the truths that had been unveiled, and ready to challenge them to look beyond their fears and embrace the possibility of change. The path ahead was fraught with uncertainty, but she was determined to lead them into the light, to a place where hope could flourish and where the bonds of trust could be rebuilt. As the Odyssey rose into the starry sky, Ilara felt a renewed sense of purpose. A new chapter awaited them, one that would test their resolve and redefine their understanding of loyalty, courage, and the very essence of humanity itself. With every pulse of the ship's engines, she carried the weight of her crew's hopes, vowing to guide them toward a future filled with possibilities yet unseen.